Hello and welcome to the Situation Report. Glad to have you joining me today. This is the show where we do our very best to give you the information and perspectives you need to navigate an ever-changing culture. My name is Jeremy Stolniker. I am your host, and today we are going to talk about a bunch of stuff. I started this interview with our guest today with the intention of talking about technology, and he has such an interesting background and such a great perspective. I think I mentioned this in the interview. His perspective is great for where we are right now because so much of what we're living through is confusing. And he's been there, he's seen a lot of this from the inside. So we talk about a bunch of stuff, but we get to the topic of technology, censorship, some of these issues that all of us are contemplating and trying to understand. And one of the things I really respect about Andrew, who we'll talk to in just a second, is that he has a perspective that is helpful. This is what's happening, this is what we can do about it, and here's why. And that's what we need to understand. Technology, any way you slice it, is a part of our lives. There was a time, maybe not that long ago, where we could take it or leave it. We no longer can take it or leave it. It is who we are. It's part of who we are. It's how we function. It's how we communicate. And we need to know how to do that well. We need to understand what is at stake. We need to understand the risks of using these free services. We're all happy about free services like Google and many of the social media platforms. What are the risks associated with that? If they're not charging us to use their product, then perhaps we are the product, as we discuss also in this interview. Very grateful to have the opportunity to have this discussion. When we talk about understanding perspectives, having the right information to navigate a culture that's changing, this conversation is one that I'm grateful to have and that I'm sure we'll have again and again and again because the situation is changing. We need to understand it so that we can change with it. I'm very grateful to have on my guest today, Andrew Riddaugh. My guest today is Andrew Riddaugh. He's going to give us his story, fascinating background. Among all of the other things that he's done, he is also the founder of Liberation Technology Services. We're going to talk about tech censorship today and some of the things that we can do and some of the platforms that we need to stay away from and why, and some of the areas we probably need to get more involved. But Andrew, thanks for joining me. Really appreciate your time today.
Oh, Jeremy, thank you so much for having me. Really looking forward to it.
Well, I would love, Andrew, first of all, for you to just jump into your story, your personal story that kind of led you to the Trump administration, how you connected there, what you did there, and man, what you're involved in now. I would imagine from your perspective, I can only guess, it's been a wild ride because for the rest of us, it's been a wild ride. But having been on the inside, I can't imagine. It probably seems pretty crazy. Tell us your story.
Yeah, so I got involved with the Trump administration very early on during the campaign. During the 16 cycle, I actually oversaw 8 counties here in Florida.
Wow.
3 of them started out as blue, and by the end of it, we almost had all 3 of them red. So we flipped 2 and almost flipped Hillsborough County, which was the bellwether for the nation. So by carrying Florida, they invited all of us up to the White House and to inauguration. And to start our political careers in DC. And, ultimately we all came to really make the America First agenda a reality. And through that, it was a wild, wild ride. I started out in a kind of small office in the White House in March of 17. And then from there, was able to rise in the ranks. That was one of the greatest things about the Trump administration is they really saw loyalty and hard work and performance and rewarded that. It wasn't just about whose donor you were associated with or, what Ivy League school you went to. They saw pure talent and rewarded it accordingly. I served there all 4 years. In the last 2 years, I was one of President Trump's senior advanced leads. And our responsibility, there was 4 of us total, was to lead the teams and the events anytime he steps off of White House grounds. So whether that's going to Mar-a-Lago or Bedminster, to your neighborhood rally, to policy events here in the United States, all the way to international events. Myself and my colleagues were the ones that worked with Secret Service, worked with the White House Military Office. We set up all the operations, the logistics, the optics. It was a phenomenal experience because we really got to help drive the America First message and set up the imagery that so many people got to enjoy, and set up all of the rallies that millions of Americans got to come out and see the president speak in person and realize he was speaking a lot of truth.
Yep.
And a lot of what the media and technology companies were doing were taking small sound bites, mashing them together to present a completely different narrative. And so after leaving my time in the White House and, spending 325 days a year on the road,
Yep.
I was hoping for somewhat of a normal life, but the Lord kind of said, nope. And he pushed me into the technology space.
Yeah.
And so we founded Liberation to be an answer to a lot of what's going on.
If we can you take a minute and go back to how you developed a conservative worldview? I'm always interested in how that happens, particularly now with the rhetoric around kind of the MAGA supporters, and this is, we're all terrorists and we all hate everyone. You're either fascist or a communist or a Nazi. We know that's not true, but there is a way that conservative philosophy and worldview is developed. How did that develop in your life? Was that something your parents taught you, something you learned by, I know a lot of people learn it just working and understanding how things work. How did you develop your worldview?
So I would say, it was a lot of how I was raised. I was raised in a small town of about 5,500. And really, I think that it was the early installation into, if you want something, you work for it. Nothing is free. Nothing is a handout. Be grateful for every single day. Value what you have. Don't envy others. And so I think a lot of it kind of comes back to the teachings of the family, raised in a religious household. So having biblical principles put into my life as well. I think that when you look at it, that's still 90% of America. There are no blue states. There are blue cities that drive the state, but that's still most of America at the end of the day. And so when they kind of demonize all of us, I think that they're doing themselves a big disjustice because they're isolating 90% of the country.
Having been raised in a conservative home that was also a religious home, how do you view what many in the church, I was raised the same way. I was raised in a conservative home. My dad was a pastor, so very much a Christian home as well. And it's been interesting to watch people in the church, in the context of the church, not all churches everywhere, not all Christians everywhere, but really push back some of those conservative values. And I agree with you. I think most of America is very conservative, but even those who should be leading, even those in the church, people of faith, who traditionally have come from a conservative background are siding with things like CRT and the litany of gender ideology stuff that we're involved in. How do you view that? Is that just a response to what's happening in society? Is it something more than that? Is it something that is even driven by media? What is driving that?
I think partially, the church has become somewhat complacent in a lot of their response. The whole idea of separation of church and state, they've literally isolated themselves in a lot of ways. And I think that you do have a few pastors and leaders that are pushing these kind of narratives, but most individuals don't adhere to a lot of this radical policy. And I think that more than anything, it is a time for, the everyday person sitting in that pew to stand up and say, no, why are we straying from so many biblical foundational principles and teachings and trying to spin a lot of the message and narrative? And I think that that is a combination of, people not standing up and voicing their disdain for it. I think that it is, media and technology bias on these pastors. And I think that there's somewhat a lack of accountability that also is taking place.
Yeah, that's right. It's been a really interesting thing to watch. I've always felt like the church and the home, those two things together have been the anchor that's kept us all kind of on the right path. And an intentional attempt to disintegrate both of those is happening, and we're seeing it in some ways in some places. Going back to the Trump administration, I'm all over the place in my brain. You have such an interesting, your background is so interesting. The things you've been involved in, I think, is so unique for the moment we're living in. And part of that is you served in the Trump administration. You saw it from several different positions, vantage points. A a lot of folks who served with President Trump are now testifying against President Trump. They're writing editorials or participating in interviews where they're demonizing his leadership, who he is, his character. Give us kind of maybe a thumbnail of your experience working in the administration. And, it's hard if you weren't there, and most of us weren't, to know if what's being said out here is real, if that is just political, which I think most of it is. What was your experience within the confines of the White House and the administration?
So let me just frame it with this. So in the White House and EEOB, the Executive Office Building, which is attached to the West Wing, there's at any given time 4,000 employees.
Wow.
And the crazy thing is that by the time the end of the administration came, I was talking to one of my colleagues, and we realized that there were less than 30 individuals still working at the White House that had been there since the early days.
No kidding.
I think that a lot of it kind of played into ambitions of individuals. They wanted to work from the White House, and I know this to be a fact. There were also individuals that worked for the Trump administration, and they despised everything that America First stood for, and so they figured they would fight the system from within. And so they joined the administration, and then, especially in the first 2 years, that's when we saw meeting notes being released before the meetings even concluded. And so there were a lot of people, a lot of rhino and traditional establishment type folks that disagreed, but they were like, I want to put the White House on my resume, and I'll try to take out the America First agenda at the same time. And so instead of a service to country, they were doing a service to self. And ultimately, that's not why we get into this. It's trying to improve the national standing and also to improve the lives of every single American. And that's what civil service is supposed to be. But I think that has been lost for some time now because, we see holdovers from every single administration coming in, and they bury themselves into these different departments, these different agencies, and they make it so that they, can fight. That is kind of the leftist view and everything. And that is, one of their main strategies. And that is exactly what the swamp is. Yeah.
It's interesting because had the president gone into the White House and fired everyone who was a holdover and brought in entirely a new staff and so forth, that would have been heavily criticized. It seems on the backside, looking backwards, that really what hurt the president was the fact that he didn't do that. And you can't say what should have happened or what should not have happened, but should something different have happened in the process of, the 4 years that he was there?
So I will say draining the swamp is not as straightforward as, it may appear. So when we got up there and we dealt with, every single department, they have similar regulations and standards. If you work for the federal government, you essentially have tenure. So you have your politicals and then your careers, and careers make up a majority of the government. And it takes over 5 years to fire a single career. So as you can see, we were getting close to being able to offload a lot of those folks, but it's citation and then probation period and then another citation. You can't just outright fire someone, unfortunately. And that's one of the realizations that we came to. It's not just something where you can fire everyone, although I believe that, your job status should be dependent on performance and not just the fact that you've been there for so many years.
Yeah. MyPillow is having their biggest sheet sale of the year. You all have helped build MyPillow into the amazing company that it is today. Now, Mike Lindell, inventor and CEO, wants to give back exclusively to his listeners. The Percale and Giza Dream bed sheet sets are available in a variety of colors and sizes, and they are all on sale for as low as $29.98 with our listener promo code. Order now, because when they're gone, they're gone. The Percale and Giza Dream sheets are breathable and have a cool, crisp feel. They come with a 10-year warranty and a 60-day money-back guarantee. Don't miss out on this incredible offer. There's a limited supply, so be sure to order now. Call 1-800-870-0283. Use the promo code SITREP or Go to mypillow.com, click on the radio listener square, and use promo code SITREP. In addition to the people that were in the White House that are now, as you said, kind of fighting from within and many of them have come out publicly, and President Trump rises above all of that. It's fascinating to me. I don't know that anyone else in the world could continue to move forward as he has with everything that's happening. But probably the other single largest area that he's been attacked is through big tech. And this is where kind of you live now, and this is where you operate now. Give us a view of big tech censorship, and then talk about what you and others have done to fight back against that.
Right. So, I think everyone in this nation knew for the longest time that those in Silicon Valley had a political leaning that was not similar to ours. They had a bias. They were doing things, but kind of behind the veil. And I think in 2020, what we saw is, they came out front and exposed their pure intentions.
Yeah.
And they took so many actions to actually combat everything that we stood for. And ultimately, it became evident that we had to create a solution to address a lot of that bias. And, whether it's Google altering their algorithm, whether a voter is a registered Republican or a Democrat, or AWS deplatforming Parler and other like-minded companies, even today, we're seeing those events happen more and more frequently.
Yeah.
I just saw an article where PayPal is holding $1.3 million of a conservative organization's funds because they don't align with them. It's their money. They should have access to it. PayPal is just a middleman in a service. And so we started Liberation Technology Services as one of the responses. With AWS, Google Cloud, and Azure, those are kind of the big three. And without that core foundational infrastructure, no application, no website, or group would ever really be safe again. So we've stood up multiple data centers across the United States as a response. And it took us a long time to do this because we built it right. We can say 100% we're not reselling or tethered or touching any sort of big cloud. The easy thing is to kind of stand up a website and just resell AWS and Google services. But we knew to solve this issue, it had to be done well. It had to be done right. And so, we're really excited with what we've been able to put together. And, additionally, there are like-minded individuals in the space that are working really hard every single day to create alternative ideas and solutions to essentially replace. That's what we need, is an alternative economy.
Okay, so people like me that understand words but don't always know what they mean. Let's talk to people like me. So AWS, we saw this with Parler, as you mentioned. I mean, they shut down Parler. They've shut down others. I'm aware of what's happening because I spend a lot of time thinking about this and talking about this. But I think one of the reasons normal people who get on their phone to look at Instagram or Facebook or whatever aren't concerned about these things, or they miss what's happening, is because they just don't understand how the technology works. Can you talk about AWS and what they do? Talk about Google Web Services and what they do, and then how what you do protects from that or defends against that. Don't go deep, but just so that we understand what we're talking about.
Yeah, so we offer services that are pretty broad. Whether you have a website on GoDaddy or Squarespace or Wix, which is a simple landing page for your online store or your startup business, we can help you with that. If you have a larger company where you're using a variety of different products or a streaming service or whatever it might be, we have solutions for that as well. If you have something that rests online, there's a good likelihood that you're currently on one of the big three, and there's an even greater opportunity because you can move over to LTS. We offer many of the same services, and we're continuing to roll out more. We actually have a new email service that we'll be rolling out here shortly, and a big one is we're rolling out a replacement to Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Google Drive, and Dropbox.
Wow.
So it's about 8 different services bundled into one platform to allow for people to get off. And why is that important? So one thing that you have to think about is everything in all these big companies, they're mining your data. And have you ever experienced where you're sitting at the dinner table with your family and you're talking about the camping trip you're about to go on, and
Yes.
next thing you know, you're getting advertising for this
Yes, I
and
have.
news, and exactly. So what they're doing is they're taking, what you're typing into your phone, into your computer, what Alexa is recording, and they're selling that information out.
Hmm.
And they're selling that to advertisers, but they can also be selling that to government officials and government agencies, both domestic and foreign. There's really no restriction under 230 that prevents them from doing a lot of these things. And so it's a continuity of government. If you're, a freedom loving patriot that is worried about, their data and their privacy, that's one thing. But if you're also not wanting the entire world to know what you're doing next week, that's another thing that you have to consider. And so ultimately we can address that because we own the hardware and everything else, and we're
Yeah.
not tethered to these big cloud providers. So we're able to give that, assurance and redundancy to protect people from big cloud.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. Again, I think even just the technology that underlies the services that we use, we don't think about it. It's not something that crosses our minds. And then something happens with Parler, or something happens with some other platform, and it doesn't register with us. That doesn't apply to us, but it does apply to us because all of our information is controlled by those folks. You talk sometimes about, or I've heard you talk on an interview about free services and free technology services, and how there are these threats that we don't consider. And on the social media side, I feel like we have done a better job. We have Getter, we have other platforms that we can go to now that we haven't had in the past. But what are some of the other unknown threats? You just mentioned some. When we talk about a free service, what are some of the unknown threats that people are exposing themselves to?
Well, at a national security level, there was the whistleblower yesterday that said there's likely Chinese Communist Party influencers and associates within Twitter. ByteDance, the owner of TikTok, is, essentially a state-owned Chinese company. And what you have to consider is, what is the Chinese government doing with all that data and information?
Yeah.
Are they going to be able to use it to influence us as individuals? There's, the kind of the strategy with subliminal messaging. Once you learn someone's behaviors and how they'll react to certain things, you can target them with subliminal messaging, with specific content to sway their reaction, to sway a lot of what they're doing. And so that ultimately is something that needs to be taken into account. Additionally, we saw what happened in Mar-a-Lago. I think that, for an obvious reason, the Democrat policy is terrible for America. Their elected officials and candidates are even worse. So now they're going to have to turn to their government entities and, law enforcement and their technology partners to really push solutions that are going to sway the outcome of the 22 and 24 election. So they're going to use all of this technology, they're going to use all of this data that they've collected on you to try to essentially manipulate how you react to certain things. And, there is no such thing as a free service or item.
Yeah.
If it is free to you, then you are the product. They are mining all of your data.
Yeah. What do you say to people who use those free services, social media and others, email clients, because that's where people are, that's where their family is, that's where other people that they know are? What would your advice be? I've had a hard time navigating this personally, and I'll tell you why. Because there's a part of me that wants to continue to express what I believe are the right perspectives on life and what's happening in the world on a platform that I know not everyone there agrees with me. Whereas if you move to another platform, if you get off of these services like Facebook and Instagram and others, you are only now around people that agree with you. How do you navigate that? Are we beyond the point of trying to influence others? How do you view that?
No, I mean, there are millions of Americans that are on the fence and they don't necessarily adhere to either side. So I think that, on a social media platform and things like that, it is important for us to try to reach across the aisle and to bring those kind of blue dog Democrats onto our side, because that's the way that we will continue to win elections. But what I'll also say is, for, Christians and conservatives and other freedom loving Americans, not only do you cast your vote in November, but you also vote with your wallet every single day. And a
Mm,
lot of the organizations that are in Silicon Valley, they stand against everything that we believe in. And so why are we funding them, helping them grow, become more powerful when there are alternatives
yeah.
out there? There's basically an alternative to everything nowadays. And so by voting with our wallets, that's how we can also push back on some of the things that they've done. Because if you look at the Zuckerberg Foundation, the Gates Foundation, all these different organizations, they're pushing CRT, transgender in the classroom, all of
Yeah.
these different things. And we're helping them do that.
Um, yeah, it's kind of a be everywhere, but be cautious and know where you are, I think. And it's understanding that a lot of folks are not your friend, even if they are willing to use you as a product. Um, do you feel like with everything that has happened over the last couple of years, and even the conversations about Russia funding technology that will sway elections around the world, and all of the things that we've been exposed to, as you mentioned, the left no longer hiding their intentions, even companies that side with the left in Silicon Valley no longer hiding their intentions, and it seems like at this point they would have stepped back. They seem to have doubled down. Do you think that the average person now is beginning to notice, to recognize, and there's an opportunity to actually make a change? I think for a long time, people just said that doesn't apply to me. I feel like we're at a place where maybe people are really going, yeah, no, this does apply to me. This actually impacts me personally. Are we there yet?
100%.
Yeah.
I work with organizations and groups day in and day out that are average, everyday Americans that in 2020 and 2021 got really pissed off and their eyes were opened.
Mm,
And they're now seeing that this is a fight to save our way of life, our nation, our world for the most part. Because ultimately they're going to try to push us so far left and conform with everything that they want that, the America of today and yesterday will be something of long in the past.
yeah.
And so, a lot of people during the Trump administration looked to Trump, President Trump, and looked to other kind of senior levels officials, and they said, that guy will handle it. That guy will
Yeah.
protect me.
Yeah.
The guy will fix it. He's still only one man.
Right.
It is, as American citizens, it's up to us to do one little thing every single day. It doesn't matter what that is, but we have to take a part to actually, push our ideals. No longer can the church sit idly by. No longer can parents stay out of the school boards.
Yep.
It's something about contributing that made America great to begin with.
Yeah.
And I think, we're now in a point where people are waking back up. They're startled awake.
Yeah, that's good. For those that are waking back up, what would your advice be today? These are the things you need to do today. These are the things you need to begin doing in the next couple of weeks and as you move forward. One of the things I like about folks like yourself is you look way down the road. It's not necessarily about the next election, and elections come and go. Presidents, members of Congress, senators, they come and go. We hope to have a good election here next month or in November. We hope that things are going to go well in 24, but we don't know. So there has to be a long-term goal. You're building that, and that's what I like about this perspective. There are things that we can do. What can people do from a technology aspect or standpoint? Just the average end user. What can we be doing to help ourselves and help our country and maintain what we have?
Yeah, so I'm working with a variety of companies that are addressing some of these fundamental issues. And any of your listeners can reach out to me and I will help them find alternative solutions. And we're actually launching a new platform that will hopefully help highlight a lot of those alternative solutions.
Yeah.
We're partnering to build that alternative ecosystem. And I think, at the end of the day, people just need to kind of take a moment and look around. What are they doing and what are they using day in and day out? Because this is the nation of capitalistic ideals. There are alternatives. It's a matter of you just selecting to move. And I mean, we were talking earlier about the free kind of situation. Yeah, Gmail's free, but is your privacy and security worth $2 a month? because that's one of the services that we can offer. It's not like it's going to cost you an arm and a leg.
Yeah.
Moving forward as well, get involved in your school board, get involved in different organizations, knock on your neighbor's door and say, hey, we got to get out and do something about this.
Yeah.
There's a great group, CCDF out of Florida, and, they're just a bunch of, parents and community members that decided that they were no longer going to sit idly by while their school boards indoctrinated their kids. Go and find your local chapter of that and support them.
Yeah.
It takes a little bit of effort every single day. And if you take 10, 15 minutes a day to make an impact in one of these different areas, we'll all start to see kind of a critical mass come together. But without locking arms and going into this together, and if we continue to stay fragmented, we're continuing to repeat our mistakes from, past.
Yeah, that's good. I just had a conversation before our interview here, and we were discussing platforms and how we all have different platforms. It could be a large platform or a small platform. Whatever you have, you need to use. And I think that's where people have got to get to. If I have 10 friends, then I'm going to get those 10 friends on board with understanding where we are and having a realistic view of what is happening and what we can do to move forward. From where you sit, from the things that you've experienced, the things you're planning, you look down the road, how do you see the next couple of years unfolding? I just said that, elections come and go, but they do come and go, and they do have an impact on our lives. What's going to happen?
And they come back, time and time again. They're every 2 years. I think that over the next 2 years, it will be incredibly interesting. I think we'll continue to see more and more action by organizations out of Silicon Valley, trying to suppress conservative religious organizations. I believe that we'll continue to see the Biden administration pulling out every punch that they can, because ultimately they can't win on their morals and merits.
Right, sure.
We know that. So they're going to leverage everything that they can. And I think that for us, it's time to wake up and realize that we're in a real fight. For so long, we've been kind of sitting there with our white gloves on, electing for others to get in the fight. But now we have to get into the streets and fight back. And, it doesn't mean we got to go and protest and burn buildings down like we saw Antifa do.
Right.
But you can vote with your wallet, join community organizations, making sure that you and your friends are getting out to vote and volunteer and little things like that. But I think that, it is kind of a critical moment in history.
Yeah.
We can stand up and, respond to the time that we find ourselves in, or we can all sit idly by and watch, our nation kind of slip to the left. And, eventually we won't be able to drive cars anymore. We'll be walking everywhere.
Yeah.
We'll be sitting in the dark in 80-degree temperatures like California. Because we're getting
Why are you talking about my state?
I'm sorry. They serve it up. They make it too easy.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
But it's kind of this government and technology that they've become partners. And ultimately, people wake up one day and realize they can't cool their own home. It's something as crazy as that to realize, that could be nationwide before too long.
Yeah, it's funny here in California, everything you just said characterizes, the life that we live. 2 weeks ago, I think it was 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, the governor said that by 2030, we'll all be driving electric cars. This was his big initiative. And, that's what's going to happen. It was literally the next day where the governor's office said, please don't charge your electric cars because the power grid, it's just crazy. It's upside down world, but that's who we're being led by. And certainly that's where we're going to end up. Man, Andrew, thank you so much for what you're doing. Where can people learn more about your company and, your products and all the things that you're involved in?
Yeah, so our website is liberationtek.com, or you can email us at freedom@liberationtek.com. And if you have any questions or, need help finding something, or, you're not sure if a service is right, reach out. Don't hesitate. We can help a lot of people. And if we can't help you, we can show you a company that will be able to help you.
That's awesome. Andrew Riddaugh, thank you so much, man. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Many of our veterans feel they need to fight their battles alone. This self-isolation has led to the staggering statistic of more than 20 veterans taking their lives every day. The mission of Mighty Oaks is to eradicate the veteran suicide epidemic and help our warriors change their legacies. We've been able to help over 4,000 veterans and first responders by equipping them with the tools they need to live the lives they were created to live. Our faith-based, peer-to-peer approach has one of the highest success rates of any program available today, offering hope and understanding to those who need it most. By aligning their lives to biblical principles, these men and women are able to lead their families, their communities, and our nation. It's your generosity that can make a difference in the lives of the men and women who have fought for our country and our freedoms. Now that they're home, don't let them fight alone. Learn more at mightyoaksprograms.org. I appreciate that perspective. What a great conversation. Again, I told you before we started, we talked about a bunch of stuff because I kept taking it different directions. So many interesting perspectives, and maybe Andrew will be kind enough to come back on and we can break some of those perspectives down. But I appreciate that. Check out his website, the work that he's doing. One of the great things about Andrew and his company is that this is something that we all have access to and we can get behind. Please go and check that out. If you are not yet subscribed to the podcast, take some time to do that right now. Subscribe if you're listening on the platform that you are listening from. If you're not yet subscribed, do that right now. And then take some time, go to YouTube. You can find the Situation Report on YouTube. Go to YouTube, search for The Situation Report. You'll find our channel there. And then take a minute to subscribe. Once you've done that, go over and hit that notification bell. That lets you know when more content comes online. And several times a week, we're pushing content to you. Want to make sure that you have that. A lot of reasons for that. One of the big reasons is that as you support that, we're able to do more of this. Have great guests on, have great conversations, and get that to you. So please go ahead and support that YouTube channel. Let us know that you're there. Leave us a comment. Share that content out. That would be fantastic. Really appreciate you joining today and look forward to talking to you next time.